They just don't know it. So they think, oh yeah, that was a pig. I'm sure that's a pig. They don't know stuff. So the next thing, and this is really important, in contracts, it was kind of true when we dealt with torts, but in contracts, everything has a test. Sometimes the test is complex. Sometimes there's many levels to it. But everything has a test. The test is the law. So when you're writing an exam on contracts, you need to write down the tests. And it tells you that on the exam, but I'm going to tell you now, I'm going to tell you over again, write that down. Because people don't. And when you don't write down the test, you will often lose marks. Sometimes your answer is not right just because you haven't looked at it, because you didn't even think about what the test is. But you will get marks for getting the test right, even if your application might not be. So, if you put down a bad answer with no test, you get a 0. If you put down a bad answer with a test, you might get part marks. And that can be the difference between doing okay or not doing very well or doing great. So, whenever we deal with a concept in this course, anything, you need to be able to write down, this is the test. And you got to know this stuff, folks. People who write open book exams get caught up in a trap. And I've seen it happen many times. They think they don't have to learn it. And sorry, this goes back to the point you were talking about earlier. It's the time issue. The time issue is connected with this. When you know your stuff, you can go bang, 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 right? But if you've got to go and look at everything and make sure, or if you're not confident enough to go, I know what that is, I'm putting it down, I don't have to look, right? That's going to cost you a lot of time. So when you know your stuff, you can go through this very quickly, but you've got to know it really well. And that gives you confidence, so you don't have to look, and it probably makes you more accurate, and it probably makes it so you don't screw things up. So, it's important to write down the tests. And if ever I go past a section and you look down at your notes and you go, I don't know what the test is for this, you put up your hand and go, what's the test? Because if you don't have it there, there's no way you can put it on the exam. Got it? You need it. So if it isn't clear to you what the test is, ask. Even if I've told you what it is, you still need to ask. Because if it's not in your notes, the other thing is, you know, when I draw it up here, it's deceiving. If I was to draw 200 separate numbers up here, it'd be a lot more accurate. There's a lot to learn here. And again, it's deadly to try and learn it all at the end. You really need to learn this super well every week. Every week. Super well. So that is done. You don't have to relearn it again. You get that, okay? Super well every week. Okay? So it's pretty important that you spend some time working with the material, quite a bit of time probably. I would probably recommend that you spend between 3 and 7 hours a week outside of class getting this stuff clear. Okay? My general rule when I was in university was 2 hours out of class for every hour in class. I don't actually teach you in class. And there's students who show up and go, I've been to every class, you know, and they don't have to do anything more. That's not accurate. Okay? That isn't how it works. Okay? All I do here is set up learning. You don't learn here. We don't spend enough time with the material for you to learn. So you've got to learn it outside of class. So I tell students that you get about a third of what you need from coming to classes and hearing what I talk about. A third, okay? The next third you get is from working with that material outside of class. And it's probably closer to, that's more like, 40 or 50, 40% outside of class and 20% inside the class. And the final bit that students often go, the aha, is I'm going to give you some case studies at the end where we're going to walk our way through, and they're hard, okay? They're hard case studies. And they're meant to be hard because it's only through doing the hard stuff that things become easier, right? Is that if you can do all the hard stuff, you shouldn't have a problem with the exam. The exam is kind of, so the case studies are up here and the exams drop down a bit on purpose, right? It's fairly straightforward. So does anybody have any questions about any of that? Go ahead.
Did you consider providing the case studies earlier?
You can always have the case studies. The problem is you can't do it until you have all the pieces. You can't have all the pieces until we're done. So there's a problem with that, in my view. But if it's going to work for you, yeah, you can get them anytime you want. Okay. There's a couple of different case studies. I think there's 3. And but until you understand how to do this process, which I'm going to start teaching you tonight, you really can't go very far. So tonight, you could go and take a look at that from step number 1. Okay? And the other thing is that life is a case study. Everything you do is a case study. How many of you made a contract today? Did you? Right there. I can see it in front of you. Did you buy that? Did you? Yeah. You didn't steal it, did you? So, he bought that. He made a contract. You do contracts all day. Most people do a couple contracts a day, right? So every time you do a contract, it's a case study. You can take a look at this from that perspective. So there's lots of opportunity to practice it if you think about it that way, without going through the formal ones that I have for you, which are really hard. The other thing I want to remind you about was this. This is my way of trying to tell you that you only learn a very small portion of what is the truth in this course. Don't ever think you learn it all. Sometimes I take things that are very gray and make them black and white. Sometimes I emphasize different areas. Sometimes I don't tell you about the exceptions to the exceptions to the exceptions because we get too far down the rabbit hole. There's a lot more out there that you will never understand, nor do you need to for this course. But you do need to know in real life, you cannot rely on the information in this course as being 100% completely accurate in what you need. There's exceptions that we don't go into. Law is very complicated. Questions? Okay. So this is basically what we're going to do. And I like giving students a bit of an overview at this point in time so that they can see how the pieces fit together. People generally fall into 2 different types when it comes to learning. We got the bird's eye. They want to be able to see the whole thing. But the problem with the bird's eye is there's no detail. Okay? And then we have the worm's eye people. You know, they come out of the worm's eye and all they can see is the cow patty that's in front of them. Right? They're the detail people. Right? And you need both. You got to be able to see it overview and you got to be able to see the detail. So what I'm going to give you right now is kind of the bird's eye view. There's not enough detail for this to be particularly useful. But then when we start giving the detail, you understand where that piece goes and how it fits. So where we're going to start is dealing with these things that are elements of contracts. There's going to be 4 of these. And again, the rules here are not 100%, this is exactly what it is. There's kind of a few exceptions to things that are going to make things a little bit more complicated. But the basic idea without the complications is contracts have 4 elements. And for you to understand this, we've got to just step away from this and go, what's a contract? What is a contract?
An agreement.
It's an agreement? So if we say, Murray, you're very handsome today, and I say, yes, I am. Is that a contract? Because we have an agreement. A formal agreement. Murray, I'd like to formally acknowledge. Does that make it a contract?
Oh, money.
You're going to find it doesn't have to be money.
How about if there's an exchange of goods or service?
If I say I'm going to come over and give you a haircut, you're okay. That isn't a contract. What is a contract, folks?
Written down.
Let's deal with that little chestnut right away. No. Okay? There are no circumstances that actually require contracts in law to be written down anymore. There's things that are smart about doing that, but verbal contracts are binding, folks. Verbal contracts are binding. And they're binding because, this is going to go back, they have everything that's needed to make this contract. These 4 things that we're going to talk about. They're all there, verbal. So, what's a contract?
How about an agreement?
But again, we're going around a little bit in circles here. If you say, Murray, that sweater looks very nice on you, I says, I agree with that. Right? Then, is that a contract? Is it? What's legal mean? That's not a bad answer. What's legal mean?
Responsibility.
Ethical responsibilities are not legal necessarily, right?
Binding.
What does that mean?
Because they agreed, because whatever it was agreed to, it has to be upheld.
Why does it have to be? Keep going. Why does it have to be upheld?
Because it's bound to the law.
Let's do it backwards. What if it isn't?
There's
If it isn't upheld?
What?
If it isn't upheld?
Yeah, what if it isn't upheld? What if you don't do what you're supposed to do? Go back to you. You said what word was that? What if you don't do it?
Get punished.
Now you can be sued for it now
Where?
in court.
Okay. So, I don't want you to underestimate how important this point is because it's so bloody obvious. Okay? Because it is, but there's some real important aspects of it. A contract is a legally enforceable agreement. You don't have to write this down because I'm not going to test you on crap like that. But you got to understand it. It's a legally enforceable agreement. And that means that we've set up a society in such a way that we can have those agreements enforced. And the way that we have them enforced is not Guido behind the barn. It's you go to court. So it is an agreement that the courts will enforce. And this is important because not all agreements are contracts. And follow the bouncing ball. What if you make an agreement that is not a contract? What does that mean?
If you don't uphold it, then you can't be sought after for not fulfilling your end of it.
I'm just going to rephrase what you said. You're right, but I just want to rephrase for the class, okay? The courts won't enforce it if it's not a contract. So if you're in business, do you want to have agreements or contracts? You probably want the ability to enforce that agreement. And our society is based on that, right? We're based on the idea that people will do what they say they're going to do. If you're a steel supplier and you have to buy steel to supply, and somebody says, I need $1 million worth of steel, and you got to buy that steel from somewhere, and maybe it's going to cost you $700,000 to get it, to ship it to the person, you've put out that money. And what happens if they don't have to pay for it? You're in trouble, right? You got $700,000 worth of useless steel, or that you have to sell things. So our whole business model is dependent on the fact that people will do what they say they're going to do. Because I will spend money to make money on the basis that they are going to pay me. And if that falls apart, where people don't have to do what they say they're going to do, our whole economy falls apart. And I don't know about any of your particular backgrounds, but I have talked to students who have come from countries in which you don't actually have to do what you say you're supposed to do. Right? You don't have to. You don't have to do what you're supposed to do. You know, you can pay somebody a little bribe, get away with it. You can. People don't enforce it. There's a corrupt judiciary, whatever, and their whole way of being is so foreign to us. We don't even probably can even recognize it. So we are trying to determine at a certain point as to whether or not we have a legally enforceable agreement. And in business, and this is a business course, that's what we want. So how do we get it? Well, the starting thing we have to understand is, like torts, contracts have these things that are called elements. They're pieces. They're tests. They're things that have to be proved. And there are going to be 4 of these. When the facts have 1, 2, 3, or 4, and 4, sorry, they have them all. This goes back to what I've taught you before. This is where the class, this is why I often teach contracts in less time than I teach torts and the legal system, because you already understand this idea of elements. You should already understand it, right? So it's saying that we have component pieces that we need in order to get to a legal concept, right? That's what these elements are. So I'm not telling you what they are, but I'm telling you there are going to be 4 of these. How many of them do you need to make a contract?
4 in all of them.
4. And put it a different way. What if one of them is missing? What? What does that mean? What's it mean if we have no contract? Yeah, we got nothing, folks. So the starting point is we need to make sure and understand what these 4 things are. And some of them are complicated. Okay? We have to understand them so that we can understand whether or not they're there. Whether or not on these facts, this is proved, this is proved, this is proved, and this is proved. If all 4 meet the test for those pieces, then we have a contract. Without it, we have nothing. We have an unenforceable, possibly agreement, but it doesn't matter what it is because it's useless legally, right? So we go through and we determine whether or not there's been a contract there. And this is going to take me a fair amount of time, probably 2 or 3 weeks to go through. There's just these 4 things. They get very complicated. Once we've determined that, though, that's not the end of the story, because contracts have these things that are called flaws. And I've recently marked a contracts exam that students did, and even though I explain this to people, they seems that by the time we get to the exam, they forgot what these things really mean. So make notes, okay? You need this stuff. So flaws are circumstances that, if you can prove, allow one side the ability to walk away from that contract, even though there's a contract. They're an exit route that some people get.
Would you repeat that?
Yeah, I will in a minute. But I'm going to try and teach by example, okay? Can you write down by example? Yeah, watch, okay? Can I have your name?
Jenna.
Jenna? You ready, Jenna? So let's say that Jenna and I enter into an agreement. And once you learn how to do this, you go through 1, 2, 3, 4. We say there's a contract there, okay? Let's presume that we've gone into an agreement that you've recognized through going through your evaluation as a contract. So that means we have a legally binding agreement that the courts will enforce. But if the circumstances arise that allow her to prove that there's a flaw, what that does is it gives her the choice. It's a choice. It's important you recognize it's a choice to say, I'm not complying with that agreement. And there's nothing I can do. So she can keep the agreement if she wants to keep it. She likes the agreement. She wants to have it. Or she can cancel it, even though we have a contract. That's the impact of a flaw. So what a flaw does is it basically destabilizes the situation because one party gets a choice to walk away. And it's completely up to that one party. So you're going to hear me say this again, folks, but we are going to go and examine fact situations. We're going to see if there's 1, yep, 2, yep, 3, yep, 4, yep, bang! Cement. What I mean by that is we are now locked in, right? So when we're examining this, it's kind of like we're standing in wet cement. As soon as everything falls into place, it's like that cement hardens and we are now locked into this agreement. You're sitting in the cement, I'm sitting, we're locked in. What a flaw does is it hands her a jackhammer. You guys know what a jackhammer is? So thing go, and what's it do? Breaks up cement, right? She can either put that aside and say, I want to be stuck in this contract. I want the deal. Or she can go and walk away and there's nothing I can do. So it's an exit route. That when it's proved, when the test for each of these is met, allows someone to walk away. You with me so far? So there's going to be 5 of these. Go ahead.
So I'm understanding correctly, you can't have a contract with all 4 elements present as well as clause present.
Yes. And again, sort of like I told you before, you can never stop this process here. Right? When you're dealing with a fact situation, you can't go, oh, this element's missing, we're done. What you're trying to do is go through it all. And I don't want to talk to you about your contracts exam. It's too early to understand it, but there's some things that I do to kind of make that a little easier for you. But so we have these things that are going to be called elements. We have these things that are going to be called clause. And there's going to be 5 of them. They're going to give people a choice to walk away. It's up to them. And then we're going to deal with these things that are called endings. They're basically how it ends. So every contract, that means all the elements are there, that is not exited with a flaw, has to have one of 3 endings. Has to. There's no other options. It's got to be 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to give you a little information about these endings because I think understanding where we're going here and why we're doing this will help you understand this stuff when we start giving you some detail here. So the most common ending is what we call performance. So I'm going to go back to this gentleman here. Can I have your name? Hamid? Hamid? Okay, so Hamid, apparently, I'm presuming you bought that, did you? How much was it? $1.90 for that? Oh. That's flavored water, my friend. All right, so he pays $1.90 for that. Did they give you that? Did you pay for it? So there's a contract that says he's going to buy this Robbins Sip to Win coffee. It's not just coffee, it's Sip to Win. Sip to Win. And it's going to have these elements. And how did that contract end? He gave them the money, they gave him the coffee was okay? Okay, and the money was okay, right, hopefully, right? So they basically what's called perform the contract. They've done what they're supposed to do according to the obligations in that contract. That's performance. Is that how most contracts end? Yes. By far. Right? People generally do what they say they're going to do. I'm not going to tell you anything about these because it gets pretty technical. I'm just going to tell you there's a second little step that is very technical. I'm going to skip over it right now because you don't need to know about it right now. But the third way it ends is something called breach. And this gives you a right to sue. It's the only thing that gives you a right to sue. And where do you sue? Okay, so we go through this entire process, folks. We're going to spend weeks to try to get to this point, which is, can anybody be sued? And when can they be sued? When all the elements are there. and there are no flaws, or people choose not to use those flaws, and it wasn't performed, and this sneaky little thing didn't happen, if that didn't happen, it was breached. And breach gives you a right to sue. And this is what we're really doing this all for. It's not so that we can sue, but to determine, can anyone be sued here? Are there any questions about that?
What is exactly breach means?
Breach means people didn't do what they said they were going to do. But the point about it is actually the end point that we're doing everything to find out if do we get there. We're trying to find out, are we going to end up there? Because it's the only one that people sue for. So you want to know that in business because you want to know, can I sue? Or you want to know, can I be sued? Right? And this requires you to analyze facts. Is there a contract? Are there flaws? Was it performed? Was this thing happen or is it breached? So it's an endpoint. It's not going to take us a lot of time to deal with that endpoint, but it's what everything is relevant to. Right? It's the whole point of the process is to determine, can there be breach? Because with breach, you get the right to sue. Go ahead.
Notice if entries would have any flaws, or what if there's a flaw and then they decide not to?
Flaws are an option. They are a choice to end the contract. People don't have to choose to end the contract, even if they can. Okay? Yeah.
So there can be both a flaw and an ending. Like there can be a flaw within the contract, and they
Yes.
choose not to use it, and
Yes.
then they can end.
Absolutely. And you're going to see when we get dealing with these case studies, circumstances in which that does make sense to do. Got it? So people can choose not to use a flaw, and therefore we bypass the flaws, if there is one. So sometimes there aren't any. Sometimes the person isn't going to use it, so we have to bypass it. But we have to know, and that's going to be a question of, that's going to be fact dependent, right? If someone's made a bad deal, they're in cement. But a flaw might say, hey, I can get out of this deal. Would they use it? Yes. But what if it's a good deal? Would they use the flaw? No. And it's only ever one side of the contract that ever gets the right to choose to use the flaw. It's one side only. So if Jenna and I were in a contract, okay, and she has a choice to use a flaw, I can't ever say, well, since she has that choice, I'm going to use the flaw because I don't want the contract. One side is stuck in cement if you get to this point. One side is definitely going to be bound. This side might. Go ahead.
Like I'm sure you'll get to it. Could you name the two sides? Like in the court, we have the plaintiff and the defendant. In this situation, we have one side of the contract holder and the other side of the contract holder. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to deal with this right now for you, okay? Because it's a fair question, and I have to deal with it at some point, and it's a simple concept for me to explain, okay? You can't deal with this in terms of plaintiff and defendant yet, okay? Because plaintiff and defendant means someone's being sued. So the standard way in which I draw this, I diagram this, is that a contract normally has two sides. So if I say, will you buy this chalk for me for $1? And you say, no, you'll always say yes. Folks, you always say yes. You never say no. It doesn't matter what it is. We don't have time for no. So you're going to say it again. It's
Yes.
okay. So she and I are in a contract, right? And she's one side, I'm the other. And it doesn't matter if you put me here or her there. The fact is there's two sides to it. And it's not connected to anything. So we're going to deal with offers and acceptance later on. It's something we're going to deal with. It doesn't matter who the offer is. It doesn't matter who the seller is. It doesn't matter who the buyer is. Those are all things you can determine on the facts. The point is there's going to be two what we call parties to the contract. And the one that's going to sue is going to be the one that has a circumstance in which there's breach occurring. It could be either side. I could not give her the chalk. She could not give me the dollar. So you can't determine that until you get the facts. Which side is going to be the plaintiff? Which side is going to be the defendant?
Right.
So I tend to deal with contracts in this course fairly simplistically in the fact that we talk about it being two sides. But it could be three sides. It could be four sides. It could be five people, right? So we could all agree that we're going to meet and we're going to share notes with each other, right? And, or we could all agree that we're going to put $5 towards buying coffee or lottery tickets, right? That it doesn't have to have two sides. But when we start dealing with that, it just becomes pretty complicated for people to deal with. That takes us beyond what we need to do in order to understand the basics. We don't have to have five-sided contracts to understand what the elements are. Go ahead.
This might be getting ahead of you, but how do you determine what side is the flaws on? Like, how do you know?
When I teach you what the flaws on, it's going to be pretty obvious who gets that right. Okay, it's going to be obvious who gets the right, and it's going to be one of them. So there's usually you'll see when we get there. Yes, you will. It's pretty obvious who gets the right to use the flaw. It's usually the good guy who gets the right to use it. We'll talk about what the good guys are. Okay, you with me so far? Okay, so I'm going to start you by teaching you about this one. And I put up the letters I, P, C, L, R. And you can always use those letters. We're going to know what they mean. Because it's one of the first elements, we're going to go through this so many times, you don't have to write it out in full. Okay? So I'm just telling you that on an exam, if you write ITCLR, I know what it means. And you can presume, that's one presumption I allow you to make, that I know what ITCLR means, and that when you're writing it, you know what it means. But right now you don't, so I will tell you what it means. It's intention to create a legal relationship. Intention to create a legal relationship. Okay, so one of those words is particularly important. Any guesses?
Intention.
Intention sounds pretty important, right? We had intention in torts, didn't we? That was important. Okay, it's not that. Okay, this ain't torts anymore. So one of the reasons I asked that is because that is a logical thing to say. It makes sense that it's intention, but it's not. It's actually legal. So what this is dealing with is a pretty tricky little concept that good thing we have a good answer for this, but it's the idea of, did we mean for this relationship to be legal? So the first question is, what other types of relationships are there that aren't legal relationships? Give me one. What? Marriage. Okay? Marriage is actually a contract, but we'll get to that. Well, I don't know if we'll ever get to it. But it's actually a contract. That's why we call it the contract of marriage, okay? But let's take it a step down. Children, right? How many of you have children? Do you have a relationship with them? And are you in a contract with them? No. Otherwise, we'd be breaching like crazy, right? There are all sorts of other relationships that people have. There's not just legal relationships. There's family. There's friendly, right? There's all sorts of other things. So you could be in a relationship with someone, and it isn't meant to be legal. So let me show you this in an example I think you can understand, okay? What do you do?
What do you mean?
Anything. Whatever you think it means, that's what I mean. What do you do?
I'm a university student.
You know, I would like to sit down and talk to you about that. Go in after class and you can tell me all about being a university student. And you say,
Yes.
yes, you always say yes, okay? So, is that supposed to be a legal relationship? If I don't show up, is this the type of thing that she goes, where were you? I'm going to sue. Right? How many of you had friends who didn't do what they said they were going to do? They said they're going to make. How many of you had that? Do you sue them? Right? Get that rat bastard thing. Right? Okay? You can't. Why not? It's not a legal relationship. So, I don't know if any of you have done this. How many of you got, Mom, can I borrow you $5 from me? I promise to pay you back. Right? How many of you have done that in your life? Or know people who have done it? Right? Or have you ever done that? Never?
I always pay back.
You always pay back your mom $5? She has a legal relationship with her mom. How many of you don't? How many of you say, Mom, can I borrow $5? You do that? And you don't ever pay her back. Why? Why don't you pay her back? Because why? It's your mom, right? Right? And that's not a legal relationship, right? So, it's a different relationship. So, this is about whether that relationship is meant to be legal. When you make that agreement with somebody, were you trying to actually make a legal agreement with somebody? And there's a problem. And now we're going to go back to the first word in this thing, which is what? Okay, now, even though that's not the key word, it's kind of important because how many of you have some intentions for anything? Do you? Point to them. Point to where your intentions are right now. How many of you intend to go home? Where's that? Point to it. Where's your intention? It's not there. Your intention is not out in the parking lot. Your intention's not at home, right? That's your attentions over there, okay? Your intentions are where? Folks, where's your intentions exist? Oh, those hard things. No, it's not hard, okay? It's in your brain. How do you prove it's in someone's brain? Say it again, I heard it. You can't. You can't prove it's in people's brains. And remember, this is an element. You got to prove it. So, if I said, oh, I meant for that to be a legal relationship, you said, well, I didn't intend that. I never intended that. That's a pretty easy way to get out of a contract, right? Oh, I never intended for it to be legal. That wasn't my intention. So, there's a problem here. And it goes back to something I tend not to deal with, but there's some circumstances which I can, which is, how do you prove it? Right? How do you prove it? And if we're talking about what happens in people's minds, it's pretty hard to prove that. And if you have to, and you can't, because they say what was happening in their mind wasn't right, people can get out of contracts all over the place. Careful. You're still stuck. You just don't know it. He's being lassoed by the cord there. Kick it out. You got to kick with both feet. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so because of that, we have a test. Did I mention anything about tests before? Are they important? Yes. Are you going to write this down?
Yes.
There's a test for element number 1, which is intention to create legal relationship. And that test are the people at arm's length? Arm's length, folks. I didn't want to have to do this, but I think I have to. I need somebody. I need a particular person. I think. Can I borrow you? Not bore you. I already did that. Borrow you. Come on up here. I hope you're not too big. What's your name? Zifan?
Yeah.
Zifan. You ready, folks? I'm giving you a visual, and I'm doing this for a reason. Remember, I need you to always remember something. I have taught this course for 20 years. How many of you were not born 20 years ago, or within, okay, a few of you, right? I've taught this course forever, and when I do something like this, it's because I'm trying to make it so you do not screw this up. And I know you will. Some of you will. Okay? So I'm trying to give you a visual. And look how hard I'm going to work, okay, to teach you this very simple concept. This is what arm's length looks like. Okay? Are you looking here, folks? This is arm's length. It's like this. Try to get close to me. Try. Just try. Push. Push. Harder. 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 I want ribs to break. Okay? Harder. That isn't hard enough. Push. Okay? What am I not doing, folks? I'm not letting him get close to me because we're at arm's length. Do you see this? This is arm's length. This is cute and cuddly. Okay? This is arm's length. Okay? This is the one we're looking for. Are the people at arm's length? Thank you much, Stephen. Very well. Give him a clap, folks. That was hard. He's up here embarrassed himself. All right? So, the first thing we look for is, are the people at arm's length? Can I have your name?
Hillary.
Hillary. So Hillary, thank you. I'm going to say this chalk for dollar. Remember that?
Yeah.
We are going to try and establish if this is a contract. And what are we going to have to establish, folks? Are we at?
Arm's length.
Yes. Arm's length. How do you know? So let me ask you this question. Are Hillary and I at arm's length?
No.
We're not?
No, you.
Well, no, okay. I'm going to give you the right answer, okay? Ready? The right answer is, we don't know yet, Murray. Could you please teach us? Okay? Don't shoot from the hip in contracts. Don't make up your own tests. Everything has a test. And guess what? The test for intention to create legal relationship starts with the idea of arm's length. But this has a test too. So you can't answer the question if you don't know what it is. So this is, are we at arm's length? Here's the test. You're at arm's length if you are not friends or family. So, take a wild guess here, folks. Do you think that Hillary and I are family?
No.
What do you think? Are we family?
I don't know.
What do you think?
No.
Okay. Hillary, are we family?
No.
No, right? Are we friends?
Yes. No.
No. We are not friends. Folks, sorry to disappoint you. You're not my friends, okay? How do I know? I don't do anything with you. Even if you like me on Facebook, even if you follow me on Instagram, okay? You're not my real friend, okay? That's Facebook, right? I got 700 people that are friends on Facebook and no one to have lunch with, right? Because I don't